second season of Books Between Bites in Batavia. I'm Becky Hogue, and this is my mother, Betty Moorhead. And she and my father started this when they retired to Batavia in 1984, around that time. And they had it in Madison, Wisconsin, and Green Bay, Wisconsin, and Carbondale, Illinois before that. So it's a long-running program, and we're just delighted to kick off our new season. And I always give a little promo here. I have an email list. Many of you are probably already on, and I have a sign-up sheet. And if you would like to be on our monthly email list where I send you what's happening in the coming month, I have this clipboard. I'll set it over here on the table. And then there are printed programs, some on the table. They're always in the pocket in the hallway in the library, and on the shelf on the inside. And also we have a website, booksbetweenbites.com, so you can always check that out. And we have photos of our speakers and more information about all the programs. So we thank you for coming. Welcome. And I'm going to turn it over to George, who's then going to do the introductions and has some information to give you.
And I don't have to give any speeches today.
Just welcome.
Thank you. Kathryn was the co-chair. Make sure that's working okay. Getting that baby up. I broke it. There we go. It would have been worse if this had just like fallen off in the middle of the talk. We don't want that to happen. So anyway, she was the co-chair.
This is the first program that we have problems with.
There wouldn't be a good program if we didn't have some problem with it. So. Anyway, Kathryn was the co-chair of a special community engagement process called Speak Up that took place last spring that followed on the heels of some other library activities. And with her indulgence and I hope permission, I'm going to give you just a couple minutes of background on something that is coming up here. And it's timely that Kathy is our speaker today because she was involved in leading to this point. You'll find on the table by the door, which you can get when you leave or any time that works, a little flyer. We have other flyers that will be coming in the mail and things like that about a referendum that the library board has put on the ballot in November. And the purpose of this referendum is to ask the voters of Batavia to redirect, transfer, if you will, a 7-cent tax rate that has been used for the last 20 years to pay for this building that is going away after this year, to transfer that 7 cents to the library's operating rate to allow us to continue maintenance and sustainability of the building and the grounds and our hours of operation and things like that. And the fact that we're asking for this redirection of 7 cents means that we're really asking for a zero tax rate change. The library's current tax rate in 2017 overall was 44 cents, including the construction bonds, and next year we're proposing and asking the voters to allow us to keep it at 44 cents. The main purpose for this is, in fact, capital maintenance of the building. The board commissioned a in-depth capital asset study, the roof, the parking lot, all the other building systems. That study was completed in 2017, and it was an eye-opener. Although we've been saving money ever since the library opened and using it to effect repairs. We just installed a new parking lot, as many of you are no doubt aware and probably grateful that we're done with that project because it was a nightmare. We found that we need $2.8 million in the first 5 years of this capital plan and $5.1 million over the course of the next 20 years in today's dollars. And in spite of saving money, we're not capable with the amount of money we receive each year to save enough to cover that. So that's why with the tax rate for construction bonds going away, can you believe that referendum passed 20 years ago? And can you believe this building is going on 17 years old? It's just, the new library is maybe not quite as new as we all think it is. And things like the roof and other things, just like the parking lot, just like our houses, every so often we've got to do something about these things. And the board is committed to two things: taking good care of this world-class facility and the services it offers, and a zero tax rate change. And so that's really all I'm going to say right now. You'll be receiving in the mail a flyer that includes all this information and more about the library. And in the short term, we've made copies of the article that was in the newest Neighbors magazine, and that's available by the door for you to pick up, that explains what I just said in writing. And thank you for your indulgence this morning.
We're glad it's here.
Thank you. Betty said we're glad it's here. I'm glad it's here too. Now for the reason you came today. Kathryn L. Hubbard, who I sometimes call Kathy, and she lets me do it once in a while. So.
Kathryn's on my Medicare card.
Oh. Medicare. I've got a Medicare card too. Anyway, I was going to give you excerpts of what she sent me, but I'm probably going to give you slightly more than just excerpts because she wrote a delightful little biography that I think you should hear. And so many of you know her well and have worked with her over the years and enjoy her company. So her cover message said, "Attached is the Kathryn blurb, which Bob the singer," now this is a reference to her husband, Robert P. Hubbard, and as an oblique allusion to the Rotary Club and his role in the past as the song master for the Rotary Club. But Bob the singer said it's too long, so edit away. I'm in love with commas, so if some are deleted, it will be considerably shorter. I love commas too, so I didn't take any out. I think I added a couple actually. Anyway. Kathy is a self-described bibliophile. She credits her passion for reading to the U.S. Army. She was born at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. She said an unmentionable number of years ago. Her family led a rather nomadic lifestyle because of her father's military career, and she lived in over 30 different locations prior to graduating from high school. That's mind-boggling.
I know. It explains a lot, doesn't it?
Her first friends were often the school or public librarians who understood a young girl's passion for print and knew she could handle a variety of genres beyond Dick, Jane, and Spot. After graduating from high school in Robinson, Illinois, Kathryn was forced to remove her eyes and nose from the pages of novels and retrain them to peruse college textbooks and statistical information and data on teaching elementary students. She graduated from Northern Illinois University in 1977 with a degree in elementary education and started teaching at H.C. Storm Elementary School in 1978. And this is a statistic that I think is great, where she could continue to teach all the way through her retirement in 2014. So she was in the same school her entire career. Is that not an amazing fact? She's an author. She penned her first and only book, Herbie Hippo's First Day of Second Grade, in an effort to ward off first day jitters for her students. Surprisingly, she discovered she actually enjoyed reading and researching riveting topics in education, almost as much as she enjoyed teaching second grade. So she continued her education at NIU and finished a master's degree in 1978. And she was working towards her doctorate until a fateful day that she met Bob Hubbard. Kathryn and Robert were married in 1984, ending her pursuit of advanced degrees and now reading books based on child development, surviving the teen years and raising strong women. Their 3 daughters, Sarah, Elizabeth, and Emily, are all happily married and voracious readers themselves. Carter and Lily, her above-average grandchildren reside in Oswego with their quite literate parents and can often be found with their smaller noses in books. When she isn't reading, she does maintain an upright position, she says, and engages in a variety of activities. She and Bob both enjoy traveling and listening to audiobooks, both abroad and in the United States. She's a volunteer at Living Well Cancer Resource Center. I think Bob was on the board there for a while.
He still is.
Okay. A member of 100, Bob's here, isn't he? There he is. Oh, hi, Bob. I knew you were here someplace. A member of 100 Women Who Care, a substitute teacher in Batavia, an elementary school tutor, a star reading volunteer, a mediocre bunco player, she says, an even worse bridge player, that's me, a Pinterest junkie, a crafter, a really fun grandma, I can believe that, the proprietor of a little free library, a beautiful little free library, and a proud member of 3 book clubs. Many of you who are here today. She can also be found in the stacks at the Batavia Public Library, where she is continuing research on how to get her Scotty to stop barking and howling at the moon. Without any further ado, to talk about the Rosie Effect, a novel, here is Kathryn Hubbard.
I'm verklempt. I didn't know he was going to read that. Well, as he said, I am a bibliophile, and I blame it on the Army. And I still have a passion for libraries, and am exceedingly supportive of this Batavia Library. And George, actually, I was going to make a comment about voting on November 6th for the library referendum, which I think is such an important opportunity for all of us to support this wonderful location. So if you can get out, please do that. So without further ado, I'm going to talk to you about the Rosie Project. And this was written by Graham Simpson, who is Australian. This is not Graham. This is Bill Gates. And Bill Gates said that he only recommends, or he has recommended 6 books, and the Rosie Project is one of them. Wow. Which surprises, isn't that surprising that Bill Gates would actually read a novel? Anyway, Graham was an information systems consultant, IT, and he wrote 2 books and several papers about data modeling before he wrote the Rosie Project. He was a senior lecturer in social work in the School of Humanities, Language, and Social Sciences at the University of Wolverhampton. And in 1982, he started a consulting business and sold it in 1999. He co-founded a wine distribution business with a friend called Pinot Now, and owns an antique store called Roy's Antiques. Oh, I gotta show you his picture. It's hard to multitask. He got his PhD from the University of Melbourne in data modeling, and he's married to Professor Ann Burst, who is currently collaborating with him on a novel. Ann and Graham have 2 children, and they live in Fitzroy, which I believe is a Melbourne suburb in Australia. The Rosie Project was published in 2014 and has earned accolades all over the world. It sold over 1 million copies, so if you don't have one, you might want to pick it up. He originally wrote it as a screenplay, and it's been optioned to Sony Pictures for a movie, which would have starred Jennifer Lawrence, but she took a better offer. And so it will be coming out May of 2019, and the people who will be playing the roles are, as of yet, undetermined. NPR gave this book a favorable review, as Bill Gates did, and the New York Times said, quote unquote, "It's cheering to read about and root for a romantic hero with a developmental disorder." Now, speaking of which, okay, I would like to talk a little bit about autism, because the primary character in this story is Don Tillman. And Don is a 39-year-old associate professor of genetics that narrates the story. He's good looking, or as Rosie calls him, a Gregory Peck lookalike. He's well thought of in his position and has symptoms of Asperger's syndrome and is consequently rigid and ritualistic in his thinking. And he goes to great lengths to make sure his life is in perfect order. He approaches everything he does in a very scientific method. So for example, he's memorized 7 meal plans. And on Tuesdays, he prepares an exotic lobster dish. So he knows that when he goes to the fishmonger is ready with his lobster. So everything he does is scientific, ritualistic, well-timed, and he feels like this is the way his life should roll. He rides a bike for fitness. He does Taekwondo, or I'm sorry, not IKEA. Begins with an A. I am not familiar with exercise terms. Anyway, he exercises a lot. He does not smoke, and he's always exactly on time. He has a few friends who he has numbered, and they are Jean, Claudia, Daphne, which I'll tell you about them in a minute, and they're extremely loyal to him and appreciate Don for the character that he is. So at age 39, what does Don do? He decides he's going to find a wife. And he does it, as he does everything, very scientifically. He bases his search on a 16-page questionnaire. And the questionnaire includes such items as height, weight, body mass index. Raise your hand if you know your body mass index.
You want to know it.
Kathy Friedland does, of course. So every person, and here, do you like kidneys? Do you have an STD? Are you a non-smoker? Do you drink much? Do you arrive early or late to events, and so forth? So unfortunately, his questionnaire bombs, and he can't seem to find a mate. Enter Rosie. Rosie Jarman is a 30-year-old bartender in a gay bar. She has bright red hair, she doesn't cook, is perpetually late, smokes like a chimney, is a vegetarian, and can care less about fitness. She's combative, quite attractive, and is basically unsettled because she doesn't know who her birth father is. She was raised by Phil, the man she calls her stepfather, after her mother is killed in a car accident, but she finds fault in everything Phil does. She's super bright, and she's actually working on a PhD in psychology. She's in Gene's department because he's the head of the psychology department. And she finds Don because Gene has recommended her to Don because he's a DNA expert. And so she is seeking out Don to help her find her father, but he thinks she's come to fill out the questionnaire. So through a series of hilarious adventures, Rosie eventually becomes a friend to Don, probably number 3 after Jean number 1, Claudia number 2. And they evolve as completely 2 opposite characters in the story. Some of the minor characters I've already mentioned are Gene Barrow, who Don says is friend number 1. He's the head professor of the psychology department. Apparently he's a sex addict. He has a map in his office with pins marking the women he slept with across the world. And his personal goal is to sleep with as many women from every country as possible. His wife doesn't like that much. So he has obviously no regard for his wife's feelings, and he cheats blatantly and often. So he sent Rosie to Don with her help in her search for her biological father. The next character is Claudia Barrow, who is Jean's wife. She's friend number 2. She's disgusted by the fact that her husband envisions their marriage as open, which she does not. And she's a therapist for Don, and they get together on probably a weekly basis so that he can hash out his life with her and she can listen, and she's truly a very good friend to him. There's another character in the story I'd like to mention, and her name is Daphne Speldwind. And Daphne is an elderly neighbor of Don, whom he befriends, and they're friends because Daphne loves being with Don and listening to him talk genetic talk, and she finds him absolutely riveting, and so they get together quite often, but unfortunately she develops Alzheimer's and has to move into an assisted living home, and later she passes away and she wills $10,000 to Don, just because she thought he was so special. And the next character I'm going to talk about is Phil Jarman. And this is the man that Rosie calls her stepfather because Rosie's mother had a dalliance with an unknown man at her mother's graduation party from medical school. So Rosie thinks that that dalliance has resulted in her being conceived. She doesn't like Phil, and she calls him her stepfather, and she's mad at him because when she was 10, he didn't take her to Disneyland. But he's raised her since she was little because, as I said, her mom died when she was young, and he is also a personal trainer. So, talked a little bit about the autism spectrum. Okay. Don is on the spectrum, although the author, Graham, never actually comes out and says that. He has what we would label as Asperger's syndrome, and it's characterized by repetitive behaviors, hence the standardized meal schedule. Everything he does is very ritualistic. The National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke formed a committee over 20 years ago, which was interesting because to many of us teachers, we know that probably about 20 years ago, autism really kind of became more common in the classroom, and consequently teachers were finding out more about it, but they formed a committee to study autism with the hopes of eventually finding a cure. And it's presumed that the cause has something to do with genetic, cognitive, and neural levels that create a triad of symptoms. So basically they're saying it's the result of multiple gene interactions or gene mutations. When it's encoding, a protein disrupts the developing brain circuits that organize themselves in the first year of life. Neurologists have also determined that the environment, like air pollution, chemicals, lack of oxygen at birth, or German measles during the first 8 weeks of pregnancy seem to have an impact as well. And in recent years, there was a fear, and I'm sure you've all read about this, that the MMR vaccines were contributing to autism, but that has been completely disproven. There are 3 types of autism. I have to tell you, I've learned a lot in my reading recently. There's number 1, autistic disorder, which is what we call classic autism. And you'll see in people with this disorder significant language delays, social and communication issues, unusual behaviors and interests, and sometimes, but not always, intellectual disabilities. Asperger's syndrome, which is what we think Don could potentially be affected by, usually has milder symptoms. There might be possible social challenges and unusual behaviors and interests. People with Asperger can be, as I said, very routine, very scheduled. And then the third type of autism is pervasive developmental disorder, and it's referred to as atypical autism. And someone with this may have Asperger's syndromes or symptoms, but not all of them, and they might have some social and communication challenges. So anyway, after reading all of this, I have discovered that probably all of us are on the spectrum somewhere. So I'm sharing this information to give you a better visual of Don and his character and how it affects his relationships with everyone he encounters, and how it complicates a life that he's worked so hard at making uncomplicated, efficient, and organized. Now the plot. As you now realize, Don Tillman, with all of his quirky, rigid, well-planned, efficient attributes, is in search of the perfect wife, which he thinks his 16-page questionnaire will identify. After all, he's quote-unquote 39, tall, fit, intelligent, with a relatively high status and above average income as an associate professor. Logically, he feels he should be attractive to a large range of women who in the animal kingdom he would succeed in reproducing with. But there's something about him that women find unappealing. I'm going to give you an example from the story. Don is set up. I still laugh when I think about these. I've read the book twice now, and it is a belly laugh. It really is. But anyway, he is set up with this woman, and her name's Claudia, and so they decide to go out to dinner. And Don says that meeting in a restaurant with someone is a minefield for the socially inept. And so after meeting at a Thai restaurant, Don feels everything's going very, very well. And Claudia announces that she does not care for Thai desserts. So Don says, let's walk across the street and have some ice cream. And she says, well, I only eat apricot ice cream. Well, guess what? No apricot ice cream. So for himself, Don orders a chocolate chili and licorice double. But because there's no apricot, Claudia passes. And Don recommends mango, and he explains in great detail the physiology of taste buds. But he tells her that she can purchase mango and peach and they'll essentially have the same effect, and she'd be incapable of differentiating. They argue for a moment, and so he decides that he's going to order those two flavors for her. So he orders 2 mini-sized cones for her, and he turns around and she's gone. I'm sorry, her name is Elizabeth, not Claudia. So anyway, she's gone. So later, when he's having his little chat session with Claudia, Claudia says, Don, you should have abandoned the experiment prior to Elizabeth leaving, but he fails to see the point or the subtleties of what occurred. And after that, he goes through several spectacularly bad dates, and then comes Rosie. And Rosie, at Jean's urging, and I think I told you this, has sought out Don to help her find her biological father. Don knows she's an unacceptable candidate, and she fills out the questionnaire and fails it miserably. So they set off on a hilarious series of adventures together to gather genetic evidence. And Don's using the genetics lab in his work to run tests on all these to determine if any of the candidates have, in fact, are Rosie's father. So they gather Kleenex and bar glasses and hair and all different kinds of pieces of materials that they can use for this study. It also jeopardizes his position at the university because he's not supposed to be running these tests. So anyway, Rosie is convinced that her mother's infidelity occurred at her graduation from med school 30 years prior. So she has a photograph from that party, and there's 100 graduates in the photograph, but they statistically narrow it down to just 40 people and that are still living. So they need to secretly be tested. So they go on this venture to find a potential candidate, and so they're gathering all of this evidence from these people. So one of my favorite, and I know all 3 of my book groups love this part, there's a madcap attempt at gathering evidence that comes, ironically, when the graduating class gathers again 30 years later. And Rosie and Don, of course, wouldn't be invited to this party, so they devise a plan to get hired as bartenders, and they work the party. So Rosie gives Don a book entitled The Bartender's Companion, a complete guide to making and serving drinks, which of course he memorizes. The night of the reunion, Don does an amazing job of creating exotic, masterfully mixed cocktails while swabbing all of the glasses. And he's collecting napkins and things like that, and Rosie's helping him do that. And he's a huge hit with the reunion attendees, but the head of catering, who offers him a job as a bartender. And I'm going to just read a little bit of this to you because it's very funny. I hope you find the humor in it as well. The bar staff was packing up, but the boss said to Rosie, "Make that man a Cadillac." Jenny and Rod Broadhurst appeared from the dining room. "Make that 3, said Rod. The other bar personnel surrounded the owner, and there was a conversation. "The guys have got to go," the boss said. He turned to Rosie and Don and said, "Double time?" Meanwhile, the diners were forming a throng around the bar, raising their hands for attention. Rosie handed a Cadillac to Dr. Browning and then turned to the boss. "Sorry, I need at least 2 to stay. I can't run a bar for 100 people myself." Me and him, said the boss, pointing to me. Finally, I had a chance to use my expertise. Rosie lifted the hinged part of the bar and let me through. Dr. Miranda Ball raised her hand. Same again, please. I called to Rosie loudly as the bar area was now very noisy. Miranda Ball, Alabama Slammer. 1 part slow gin, whiskey, Galliano, triple sec, orange juice, orange slice, and a cherry. We're out of triple sec, yelled Rosie. Substitute Contreau, reduce the quantity by 20%. Dr. Lucas put his finished drink on the bar and raised his finger. 1 more. Jerry Lucas, empty glass, I called. Rosie took the glass. I hope she realized that we didn't have a sample for him yet. Another, and probe for Dr. Lucas. Got that, she called from the kitchen. Excellent, she'd remembered to swab. Dr. Martin Van Krieger called out loudly, is there a cocktail with Galliano and tequila? The crowd quieted. This sort of question had become common during dinner, and the guests had seemed impressed with my responses. I took a few moments to think. Martin called out again, don't worry if there isn't. I'm re-indexing my internal database, I said to explain the delay. It took a few moments. Mexican Gold or Freddie Fuddpucker? The crowd applauded. 1 of each, he said. Rosie knew how to make a Freddie Fuddpucker. I gave the boss the Mexican Gold recipe. We continued in this mode with great success. I decided to take advantage of the opportunity to test all male doctors present, including those I had previously filtered out because of incompatible ethnic appearance. At 1:22 a.m., I was confident that we had tested all but 1 person. It was time to be proactive. Dr. Anwar Kwan, approach the bar, please. It was an expression I'd heard on TV. I hoped it carried the required authority. Dr. Khan had only drunk from his water glass and had carried it with him to the bar. You haven't ordered a drink all night, I said. Is there a problem? I don't drink alcohol. Very wise, I said, although I was providing a bad example with the beer open beside me. I recommend a virgin colada, Virgin Mary Virgin. At this moment, Dr. Eva Gold put her arm around Dr. Kwan. She was obviously affected by the alcohol. Loosen up, Anwar. Dr. Khan looked back at her and then at the crowd who were in my assessment also exhibiting the effects of intoxication. What the hell, he said. Line up the virgins. He put his empty glass on the bar. So that's just one excerpt from the story that just exemplifies Don's personality and his skill set. So anyway, as the story continues, Don receives a questionnaire completed by a woman named Bianca Rivera. And he's thrilled to realize that Bianca has met all of the criteria for a wife. Even though Jean encouraged Don to invite Rosie, they're going to have a faculty ball, and so Jean thinks Don should bring Rosie, but he invites Bianca. So Bianca arrives at the ball in a real flashy gown, and Don knows that she's a professional dancer, and so he's been practicing back in his office with a skeleton that he borrowed from one of the departments, and he's practicing like crazy, and he thinks he's got all the moves down. So he doesn't really dance, and Bianca has won the state ballroom championship twice, and she's appeared on TV, and Don doesn't dance. Not a problem, he's ready to go. He runs a tuxedo and a top hat, and he sets off to dance the night away. Excuse me for 1 second here. So he starts dancing with Bianca, and basically he drops her. So it's not pretty. So she's mortified and she starts to leave the ball. But who does she hook up with? The Jean. Rosie saves the day. After consulting with the band, she points at Don, and if you've all seen that the Grease movie, where Olivia Newton-John goes like this to John Travolta, that's what she did. And Don knows that move. So anyway, she points at Don, and she drags him to the floor, and Don says she's considerably easier to dance with than a skeleton. So he says, I took her in the standard jive hold that I had practiced on the skeleton and immediately felt the awkwardness, approaching revulsion that I had felt when forced into intimate contact with another human. I had mentally prepared for this, but not for a more serious problem. I had not practiced with music. I am sure I executed the steps accurately, but not at precisely the correct speed, and not at the same time as the beat. We were immediately tripping over each other, and the net effect was a disaster. Bianca tried to lead, but I had no expertise with a living partner, let alone one who was trying to be in control. People began laughing. So anyway, Bianca takes off, and he starts dancing, and he does dancing moves like, and some of you will know these, like the running man and milking the cow and the fishing imitation. And he tries to, well, this is before she takes off, so he tries to reel her in, and she, of course, doesn't know any of those moves. So anyway, Rosie comes to the rescue because he's standing there all alone now on the dance floor, and so that's when she does the John Travolta stuff, and she pulls him in, and they dance their way through the Grease song, and then the band starts playing Satisfaction, which Don says, it may have been due to the fact of the Gordo Blanco wine and my cognitive functions, but I was suddenly overwhelmed by an extraordinary feeling, not of satisfaction, but of absolute joy, which is a pretty uncommon feeling for him. I feel like I'm not doing my PowerPoint here, and it's so lovely. Okay. Which I need to do a shout out right now while I'm thinking about it to Misty, who is the techie that helped me yesterday afternoon when I showed up to create a PowerPoint, and she did most of the work. This is not my forte, and so I texted George. I said, Misty deserves a raise, and George said, that's not in my power, so I think, George, a company car would be appropriate. Okay, anyway, so work on that. Okay. So now Don's pretty much set aside the wife project to give the father project all of his attention, and I wish I had more time to tell you about the madcap escapades that they went through to gathering the DNA. That's probably one of the most hilarious parts of the story. The journey takes them all over Australia to different events and to New York City, and Rosie gets discouraged and wants to abandon the project, but Don is insistent that they finish it. So toward the end of the novel, Don has a conversation with Jean, and he realizes that Gene, the philandering husband, could possibly be Rosie's father because he was the one that took the photograph at the original party 30 years prior. So while they're sitting there having coffee and Gene gets up to leave, Don casually just reaches over and grabs his napkin to run a DNA test on. So the fun keeps coming. In an effort to win Rosie's heart, and by the way, Don has all of a sudden realized that he really does care for her, even though she smokes and she doesn't exercise and she's a vegan. He's changed the way he dresses. He stopped wearing his 7-year-old shirt. He's working on a not standardized schedule, except for important activities like lectures and meetings and martial arts classes. He changed his 7-day meal schedule, and when he went to the fishmonger had his lobster ready. Well, guess what? He ordered tuna. No, he ordered not clams, the other one. Oysters. He ordered oysters. So he went home and prepared this elaborate oyster feast. He even watched films that Rosie had mentioned to kind of get a feeling for what he should be. He watched Casablanca, The Bridges of Madison County, When Harry Met Sally, An Affair to Remember, and he took copious notes on all of the movies and started using some of the lines on Rosie from the movies. He had visited an optometrist and wasn't wearing glasses anymore. He went to a hairdresser. So he was sure that it would make Rosie fall in love with him. When he's all finished getting himself ready for what he thinks Rosie's image of him should be, he asks her out on a date. And he picks her up with flowers in hand, and he takes her to a restaurant where previously, because he was not attired properly, they were moved by 2 bouncers. And, I'm sorry. And this time he's wearing conventional attire. And after they're seated, Rosie says, "Okay, Gregory Peck," which is what she says he looks like. "What are we doing first, the My Fair Lady story or the big revelation?" And Don responds with, "When you realize you want to spend the rest of your life with someone, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible." And he pulls out an engagement ring. And Rosie freaks. So Don goes home, drinks an entire bottle of alcohol, and reflects on what he has learned. Excuse me for 1 second here. Before I conclude, I want to tell you that there are several themes running through the story, and I don't think I have time to really go through all the themes, but I will share them with you. The first one is mental illness, because obviously there are some mental health issues going on in the story. And the second one is social acceptance and how we accept others who are different from us. The third one is love is not science, because Don thinks everything is scientifically based and discovers that that's not necessarily true. The next one is infidelity, and Gene finds out that his wife is not so happy with his lifestyle and choices. And then the last one is paternity, father versus dad. So you know that Rosie is looking for her biological father. So after the fiasco at the restaurant, Don seeks out Rosie again, and he finds her at the university club where, in his own unique way, he tells her how much he loves her, and they agree to get married. They do get married, and they go to Disneyland with Phil. So moral of the story is, you don't find love, it finds you. Now, I hope you've been paying close attention, because I have not revealed who Rosie's dad is. I'm going to show you possibilities. Is it Gregory Peck? Is it Gene? Is it Phil? Is it a random medical student? Okay, any thoughts out there? Don't tell if you've read the book. It's actually Phil. Phil was, in fact, her real father. And Don realized this because when Phil and Rosie and her mom were in the car accident, the first person that Phil pulled out of the car was Rosie. And through some scientific method of thinking, Don realized that, of course, you're going to save your child. And so that's what he did. So I have to tell you that this is a delightful book. If you want to laugh, if you want to smile, if you want to connect, it's just a beautiful read. It really, truly is. And Graham Simison has followed it up with, I have not read this yet, The Rosie Effect, which is his next book. So I'm hoping all of you will have an opportunity to enjoy his books, because coming from IT, it is surprisingly pleasant to realize that he can write such passionate books about mental disorders and relationships and things that just, are different from scientific. So thank you for listening today, and thank you for being here. Do you have any questions? Yes?
Do you think the author has Asperger's?
Becky, that's a really interesting question, and I've watched interviews with him, and he does not exhibit any of the symptoms. However, he must carefully have researched autism because he's got all of the characteristics down to a science.
Or worked with.
That's possible. You know, in IT, you know, a lot of Asperger people have IT kinds of positions because they can be very, very intelligent. They have a lot of statistical knowledge, and perhaps Graham did, in fact, work with a lot of people like that. Yeah. Other questions? Well, all three of my book groups read this, and they all loved it, so it's been fun to present a book that is so engaging to all of you, and thank you for being here today.